Welcome back, everyone, to Hmong Unabridged, the podcast where we dive into what's actually like growing up as first-generation Hmong kids in America, where we talk about the struggles, culture, and everything in between. We are continuing with our folktale series today, where we talk about stories told to us when we were kids and reminiscing about the lessons we've learned and cherished. This is your co-host, Banya.
And I am your other co-host, Sho. Today we will be retelling one of my favorite stories, the Hmong version of Cinderella, called Nkauj. Once upon a time, there lived a man and his wife who had one daughter named Nkauj. After many years of not being able to conceive again, the husband suggested to his wife, "Dear wife, let me go and marry another woman, and maybe I may have a son to carry on my name." Not knowing what to do about their fertility struggle, she reluctantly agreed. So the man went out each day in search of another wife. One day, the man came home, and with him was his new wife, who brought along her own daughter from her previous marriage. This daughter was named Nkauj, and she was almost the same age as Nkauj. They lived in relative agreement as first wife and the new wife as the second wife. One day the man said to his wife, "Let us go into the market tomorrow and buy ourselves a cow to help plow the fields." And his first wife agreed. Early the next morning, the man and his first wife headed out towards town where they were selling cattle. Once they made it to the cattle stall, they noticed that there was a large crowd who was also wanting to buy a cow. But to their dismay, there was only one more cow to be purchased. Contented from the turnout of purchasers that day, the owner of the cow said to the crowd, "I only have one cow left to sell, and I know there are many of you who are still seeking to buy a cow. I will prepare a large pot of porridge and equally divide it among you all. The first person who finishes their bowl of porridge will get to buy the cow." And so the owner of the cow prepared a boiling pot of porridge and gave each person a piping hot bowl. The man and his first wife blew and blew on their porridge. They slowly ate and blew, ate and blew. But a clever man was among the crowd. He poured cold water into his bowl, immediately cooling the porridge. Then he drank the entirety of his bowl and went up to the owner and purchased the last available cow. The man and his first wife left the market forlorn and disappointed. They trudged back towards their home. They climbed over a hill and saw their lush field of green grass, and the first wife looked at her husband. He was despondent and silent as he looked out into the fields. The first wife said to her husband, "I know we need a cow, and since we weren't able to buy a cow today, turn me into a cow." Without a word, the husband reached up into a tree nearby and pulled down a hanging vine. He whipped the first wife's feet 3 times, and her feet turned into hooves. He whipped her waist 3 times, and her body transformed into the body of a cow. He whipped her once more around her head, and she completely transformed into a cow. The man took the cow and tied it against a post in the field and went home. Once he got home, he said to his daughter Nkauj, "Go and bring food to your mother. She is in the fields." So Nkauj packed some food and headed out to the fields. When she arrived at the fields, she yelled out for her mom, "Mom, come eat. I brought you food." The cow that was tied to the post looked at her and mooed, "Moo." "Oi, you cow! I'm calling for my mother. Why did you respond?" said Nkauj. She yelled out again, "Mom, come eat. I brought you food." And once again the cow responded, "Moo." "Cow, I'm looking for my mom, not you." And Nkauj said one more time, "Mom, come eat." And once again the cow mooed, "Moo." Not seeing her mother, she left to find her father. "I couldn't find Mom when I went to the fields," she told her father. "I only saw a cow." Her father said, "That cow is your mother." Shocked, Gao Na ran back to the fields and embraced her mother. "Oh, Mom, I did not know you are now a cow." At that point, the cow began to speak and explained to Gao Na all that had happened and how she had become a cow. Gao Na sobbed into her mother's side. Stroking and petting her mother's head, she could not stop crying. "Do not cry any more, Gao Na," her mother said. "I will be here every day waiting for you." And so every day Gao Na would come and visit her mother in the fields. As the seasons changed, the time for harvest was upon them, and Gao Na's mother knew she had to take care of her daughter somehow. So when Gao Na arrived one day, she told her, "Feed me flax going forward." And so Gao Na would come every day and bring her flax to eat. One day, her mother said to her, "The end of harvesting season is among us, and with that, a huge celebration will be held. I cannot help you prepare your clothes for the celebration, but reach your hand into my anus." And so Gao Na did as her mother told her, and reached her hand into the cow's anus. And when she pulled out, she was holding a strand of beautiful thread. She was able to wound the thread round and round until she had a large ball. "Since I am unable to help you turn flax into thread myself, take the thread that you retrieved and make clothes for yourself." So Gao Na took the beautiful ball of thread and went home. At home, her stepmother and stepsister saw what she had and questioned her. "Where did you get that ball of thread?" Gao Na explained that she had stuck her hand into the anus of their cow, and when she pulled out, she was holding a beautiful thread. She then began winding it, and by the end, she had retrieved enough to create the large thread of ball. With envy in their eyes, the stepmother ordered Gao Na to go work in the opposite fields, and Gao Teng would go and tend to the cow tomorrow. The stepmother instructed Gao Teng to do what Gao Na had told them. She was to stick her hand inside the cow's anus and see if she too would be able to retrieve beautiful thread. The next morning, as Gao Na made her way to the garden on the other side of the field, Gao Teng went to tend to the cow. Not wanting to stay too long, for she was a lazy young woman, she hurriedly stuck her hand into the anus of the cow, but instead of easily pulling her hand out, her hand was stuck, and the cow, alarmed and startled, began to run. Gao Teng's hand still stuck inside the cow's anus. The cow dragged and kicked at Gao Teng, and at the end of it, she had ran around the entire field and into bushes that caused immense burning and itching. Gao Teng's hand finally slipped out, and she trudged home, bruised, bloodied, and itchy. When the stepmother saw Gao Teng, she seethed in anger. "How dare Gao Na lie to me? I must kill this cow as punishment." And she began plotting ways to get rid of the cow, for she too knew that the cow was actually the first wife as well. One day, the stepmother feigned illness and stayed in bed all day. She moaned and groaned for a few days, until her husband came to her and asked, "You are so sick, is there anything I can do to help you?" The clever stepmother said in a weak voice, "I've heard that there's a magical black stump up on the hill. It will be able to tell you what you can do to help me." The husband left to go visit the magical black stump at once. When the man left, the stepmother took a pot, rubbed her hands on the underside of the pot where it was black from being heated up, and rubbed her face, covering it in black soot. Then she raced into the hills, avoiding her husband on the way. She made it onto the hill and hid behind a large black stump, when she spotted her husband walking up the hill. "This must be the magical black stump second wife was talking about," he thought to himself. So he asked the stump, "Oh, black stump, my second wife has become quite sick. What can I do to help her?" The stepmother moaned out loud and said, "Oh, this is a sickness caused by a cursed item. At your house there is a beautiful ball of thread. Destroy that ball of thread and she will become better." So the husband left and headed home. The stepmother rushed home, making sure not to pass her husband. She wiped her face and quickly got back into bed just as her husband walked into the door. "What did the magical black stump say?" she eagerly asked. Thinking about the beautiful ball of thread that belonged to his poor motherless Nkauj, he said, "The stump said that the illness will pass in time and you will get better soon." Annoyed, the stepmother responded, "You liar! I heard it say that the beautiful ball of thread must be destroyed and I will get better soon." So she angrily got up, grabbed the ball of thread, and threw it into the fire. The stepmother had placed a rotten egg inside of the ball of thread, and once the flames licked away the thread, the egg popped with a loud bang. "See, I told you that was a cursed ball of thread," said the stepmother. Not long after, the stepmother had not forgotten about the cow incident with Nkauj and feigned sickness again. She laid in bed for many days, moaning and groaning, until her husband came up to her and asked, "Second wife, you have been so sick, what can I do to help you?" The stepmother looked up at her husband and said, "I heard there's a magical black boulder near the hill. If you go and ask it, it will tell you what to do." So the husband left to go in search of the magical black boulder. As soon as her husband left, the stepmother rushed out of bed, took a pot, rubbed her hands on the underside of the pot where it was black from being heated up over coals, and rubbed her face, covering it in black soot once again. Then she raced outside, taking another path down towards the hill, making sure not to be sighted by her husband. She ran all the way to the black boulder on the hill and hid just in time before she spotted her husband approaching. "This must be the magical black boulder," thought the man. "Magical black boulder?" he asked. "My second wife has been so sick these past few days. What can I do to help her?" The stepmother cried out in a low voice, "She has a deadly illness, an illness that can only be cured by the sacrifice of a cow. Sacrifice a cow, and she will soon get better." So the husband turned around and went back home, a bit distressed. The stepmother quickly jumped out from behind the boulder and raced back home, wiped her face with a cloth, and jumped back into bed. Her husband made his way through the door just as she was settled into bed. "What did the magical black boulder say to you?" asked the stepmother. Not wanting to harm his first wife, who was their only cow, he said, "The boulder said that sickness comes and sickness goes. You will get better soon." The stepmother retorted, "You liar! I heard it say that we must sacrifice a cow and I will get better." "Let's hurry and kill the cow. Isn't my life more important than a cow?" And so the man had no choice but to agree and kill the cow. Nkauj heard the news and went into the fields to tell her mom. "Oh, Mom," Nkauj said, "they said they are going to kill you." Her mother looked at her with sadness but said, "It is all right," her mother soothed her, "but I am afraid of the axe. When the time comes, please bring water and pour it in front of the doorway. That will make the ground wet and slippery. Stick a knife into the ground in front of the door. When I step into the house, I will slip on the muddy ground and fall onto the knife. That way I won't die by the axe." When the day came to butcher the cow for sacrifice, Nkauj did as her mother instructed. She poured water in front of the doorway and stuck a knife in the ground. She then led her mother back to their house and into the doorway. When the cow slipped on the mud, it fell on top of the knife and died. When all was done and the cow was butchered, the stepmother called to Nkauj. Knowing well that the cow was the first wife, the stepmother refused to eat the meat, but said to Nkauj, "Take these portions of beef and give it to the neighbors in the village." So Nkauj took the portions of meat from her stepmother and headed out the door, but instead of bringing it to the villagers, she had remembered that her mother had given her other instructions before she died. Her mother had said, "When you are given meat from the sacrifice, go and pour it into the pig trough behind the house." So Nkauj did what her mother had said and threw the bowl of meat into the pig trough. She came back to the house, and her stepmother gave her more meat, And again, instead of delivering the meat to the villagers, she threw it into the pig trough behind the house. She repeated this until all the meat was gone. Finally, as the harvesting season ended and the new year approached, the New Year celebrations were underway. The stepmother and Gauteng planned on going to the celebrations in town to find a husband for Gauteng. The day came, and as they set forth on their way, the stepmother forbade Gauna to go with them. She said, "Stay home. Pick these rat droppings out of the grains of rice." Then she took a bowl filled with rat droppings and poured it into the basket of rice, mixing them into the grains of rice, and left with Gauteng. Gauna crumpled to the floor and sobbed. She slowly picked at the rat droppings one by one as tears streamed down her face. "Oh, how cruel it is to live in a world where no one loves you," she mumbled to herself, when she heard a little voice saying, "Gauna, the pig trough." She looked up, wondering who had said that. When she saw no one, she continued wallowing in her sadness and continued picking at the droppings. "Oh, how cruel it is to live in a world where no one loves you," she mumbled to herself again. Again, a small voice said, "Gauna, the pig trough." Gauna looked up to see who was speaking, but once again there was no one there. "Who is speaking to me?" she thought. Then she said one more time, "Oh, how cruel it is to live in a world where no one loves you." And once again, a small voice said, "Gauna, the pig trough." And this time Gauna stood up and walked over to the pig trough where she had threw away the meat from the cow sacrifice. Inside the trough was a beautiful new outfit that gleamed in the sunlight. She finally understood that this must have been the work of her mother. She quickly ran back into the house, swished and swirled her rice, gathered the pile of rat droppings and disposed of them, then ran back to the pig trough. She put on the beautiful new outfit and made her way to the celebration. When Gauna made it to the celebrations, the field was already filled with many people from the surrounding villages. Food booths filled the field as well as eager shoppers. Children ran around, and young men and women stood in groups anticipating the prospects of their future. She walked through the crowd, and as she went, heads turned and followed her, their eyes admiring her beauty. She quickly drew the attention of a young man named Shina, who was himself followed by a group of eager young women and their mothers. "Dear maiden," Shina said, "would you like to ball toss with me?" He lifted the ball that he was holding. As it was hard for young couples to talk to one another in public back in the day, the traditional game of tossing a ball between a man and a woman allowed the young couples to converse in public while courting. And so, since Gauna saw that the young man looked trustworthy and handsome, she agreed and caught the ball he threw at her. She tossed the ball back at him, and he threw it back. Back and forth the ball went between the couple. Shina was so enamored with Gauna that he did not want to ball toss with anyone else, and he wouldn't let anyone else ball toss with her. So they spent the afternoon ball tossing and conversing with one another. When the sun had reached its highest peak in the sky and began to sink, Gauna knew she had to get home before her stepmother and stepsister. Gauna said, "Lengyo da," which can be interpreted as "Dear handsome young man, we have been ball tossing all day, and I have become quite thirsty. Can you please go find me a drink?" Shina was delighted and said, "Yes, I will go get you some water, and I will be right back." So he finally left her side and walked into the crowd in search of water. Gauna used this opportunity to slip away. When Shina came back with water, he saw that Gauna was no longer there. He looked around and saw that she was running a distance away and began running after her. He chased her distant figure into the village nearby. He saw her run past some huts and disappeared. Gauna turned and saw that Shina was following her, so she stripped off her clothes and threw them back into the pig trough, then went and sat in front of their front door. As Shina ran past her, he asked, "Have you seen a beautiful young woman run past?" Gaona replied, "No, I haven't, but I did hear a dog barking in that direction," and pointed a finger down the road. Shina followed her direction and ran down the road. The next morning, since the New Year's celebrations lasted 3 days, the stepmother and Gaoteng left for the celebrations again. And once again, Gaona was left at home. When they had gone, she went back to the pig trough and found the clothes that appeared just as the day before. She got dressed and made her way back to the festivities. Once she got there, Shina found her and asked to ball toss again. They ball tossed all afternoon until the sun was at its highest peak and began to sink. When Gaona said again, "Lingya da, we have been ball tossing all day, and I am very thirsty. Can you please go and find me a drink?" Shina replied, "I will go find some water, but you have to stay here and wait for me. Don't run away again." "I won't run away," Gaona said. But as Shina turned away and disappeared into the crowd, Gaona turned and ran towards her village. When Shina returned with water, Gaona had already ran away, and he saw her figure running in the distance. He dropped the water and ran after her again. Once again, he lost her behind a few houses, and once again he met Gaona sitting outside her front door in plain clothing. "Have you seen a beautifully dressed young woman run past?" he asked. "No, I haven't, but I heard a dog barking over there," and she pointed down the road. Shina thanked her and ran down the road. On the third day, Gaona once again waited until her stepmother and Gaoteng left. Then she got dressed and made her way back to the New Year celebrations. Shina found her once more, and they began to ball toss. When the sun was at its highest peak and finally sinking, Gaona once again asked Shina to go look for some water. This time Shina replied, "Last time you ran away from me when I went to get water. How can I know that you won't do it again?" Gaona replied, "I won't run away. I will stay right here." Shina reluctantly turned away, but as he turned away, he looked back quickly and saw Gaona was sprinting through the crowd. He followed after her this time closer than before. Gaoteng was there too and saw that Shina was running. She followed him because she had been waiting for a turn to ball toss with him for the past few days, but had not had the opportunity since he had been occupied with a maiden she could not recognize. So when he ran, the stepmother and Gaoteng both ran after him, hoping to catch him. Shina followed Gaona down the road towards her house when her foot got caught on a branch and her shoe fell off. She kept running, but Shina stopped quickly to scoop up the shoe and continued running. Gaona stripped her clothes off and threw them into the pig trough without the one shoe that came off, and ran to sit in front of the front door. Shina made it just in time to see her, and he confronted her. "You are the beautiful maiden that I have been ball tossing with. Why did you run away from me? I have your shoe." At that moment, the stepmother and Gaoteng also made it home, and the stepmother exclaimed, "Oh, that shoe belongs to Gaoteng," and insisted that Shina put the shoe on Gaoteng. So he did, but Gaoteng's feet were larger than Gaona's, and it didn't fit. Shina turned back to Gaona and put the shoe on her feet, which fit perfectly. "I am going to take you home and marry you," Shina said to her as he took her hand. The stepmother stepped in between them and said, "No, no, 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 no. It's already too dark. Let me make us dinner, and you can go on your way tomorrow." So Shina didn't insist on going home that night. The stepmother made a feast that night with rice and meat, but she also made bitter green soup and tough barley grain. She placed the tough barley grain and bitter soup in front of Gaona, but placed the soft rice and meat in front of Gaoteng. The stepmother then blew out the candle and told them to eat. Shina had seen what the stepmother had done, so he quickly switched the bowls of rice and barley and bitter soup and meat. The bowl of bitter soup and barley were now in front of Gaoteng, and the rice and meat was in front of Gaona. As they began to eat, Gonteng said to her mother, "Mom, this is bitter soup and tough barley." So the mother said, "No, it's not. It's rice and meat," and left to go turn on the candle. Shina quickly switched the bowls back to its original place, and when the candle was brought back to the table, the mother said, "See, I told you. That's rice and meat, Gonteng." Then she blew out the candle again, and once again Shina switched the bowls. As they continued eating, Gonteng said, "Mom, this is bitter soup and tough grain." The stepmother said, "No, it's not. It's meat and rice." So she went to lit the candle again, but before she brought it to the table, Shina had once again returned the bowls to its original spot. When the candle was brought to the table, the meat and rice was once again in front of Gonteng. The stepmother blew out the candle again, and Shina switched the bowls again. This time, Gonteng decided not to ask her mother and just resorted to eating the bitter soup with tough barley. That night, the stepmother insisted on letting Gonteng sleep with the couple. She instructed Gona to sleep at the edge of the bed and Gonteng to sleep next to the wall, while Shina slept in the middle. As everyone fell asleep, Shina woke up and switched the two young women. Gona was now sleeping next to the wall, and Gonteng slept on the edge of the bed. He then went to sleep. Later that night, the stepmother constructed a thick mask made out of beeswax and covered her daughter's face, thinking it was Gona, who was still sleeping at the edge of the bed. Before the sun came up, early in the morning, the stepmother quietly made breakfast. Gona and Shina quietly got up and ate breakfast. The stepmother packed them a lunch and set them on their way before the sun came up, telling them not to wake the sleeping girl. Since Gonteng had the thick wax mask on, she could not open her eyes, so she thought that it was still night, and she continued sleeping, not knowing that the couple had already left. When it was midday, the stepmother was working on her loom and said, "Oh, my little Gonteng and Shina must be halfway home now." And Gonteng, hearing her name, said back, "Mom, I'm right here." "Oi, you stupid girl, I'm talking about my Gonteng," replied her mother. By the late afternoon, as the stepmother was still working on the loom, she said, "Oh, my sweet Gonteng and Shina must already be close to home." And Gonteng, hearing her name again, said, "Mom, I'm right here." This time the stepmother was not happy and impatient with hearing the sleeping girl talk. She threw her shuttle from the loom at the sleeping girl, and the beeswax flew off her face, revealing to the stepmother that it was indeed her daughter, Gonteng. "Oh yo, my daughter, that evil Shina tricked me and left you behind. Hurry, let me pack you some food and clothes. You have to chase after them." So the stepmother packed Gonteng some food and clothes, and Gonteng stepped out of her mother's house to follow Gona and Shina. And that is the end of part 1. Please stay tuned to our next episode where we will continue part 2 of this story. Now, Banyam, what do you think of this story?
In this story, one of the reasons why the husband married a second wife was they didn't have any more children. And I can think of a couple of ways why they needed more children, because during that time, they need all the help they can get in order to survive, in order to go to the garden, farm, and all those stuff. And then I feel like, during those hard times, that's probably the only way to survive. But then as time goes on, I want multiple wives.
To me, it's just the norm back then. Everyone did it,
Yeah,
so
that's
I must
kinda
do
it.
it too. I feel like it was just so ingrained in the culture that it was just something that everyone did and it was okay. But in the story, pleasantly shocked that he actually asked his wife. But behind the scenes, he probably liked her already or had
Or he was
wanted to
already
marry.
visiting her.
Yes, or he was already wanting a second wife and just using the, "Hey, we have no kids, let me go find myself another wife." But I don't know. It's just one of those things where, like I said, it's very culturally accepted back in the day, and that's what they did. When I was asking mom to give me details about the story again, because I only remember the key points about Gona and Cow and Gina. And then mom was telling me how it was the mom who suggested it and the dad really didn't argue. I remembered that it was the dad who suggested, hey, I'm going to turn you into a cow. But mom told me that it was the mom who suggested it. And I was like, oh, that's kind of sad. But maybe it was because she knew that she would be more, or she knew that her husband was already so upset that it was her way of helping
I
whatever she
do
could.
remember that it was the mother who told the father to turn her into a cow. And I understand where she's coming from, because how I see this is back then, now that they don't have a cow, what are they going to do? Because the cow was going to help them with their garden and it was supposed to help them financially. So back then, if you don't have that financial, if you don't have money, right, would you do during that time? Sometimes they would sell their daughters to Hmong or just to shore, you know.
Yes.
And as a mother, I would think ahead. I would be like, okay, my husband is upset. We don't have the cow. He's upset. We won't be able to provide for the family. What is the next thing? I've seen multiple people selling their daughters out to random people. There might be a chance that my husband will do that. So let me take on that role of a cow, right? If you think about it, the story says she turned into a cow, but symbolically, she may be working like a cow, right? Working so hard.
Funny how you said that because me and mom were just talking about the story, and she said that maybe symbolically the cow was just symbolic to the story and she wasn't actually a physical cow, but she, the mother herself, was sold into slavery to buy a cow.
Oh, that could be it
And
too,
I was like,
right?
"Oh my
Yeah.
goodness." I had one of those like light bulb moments. And I was like, "That
Hmm.
makes sense." Maybe Gona was able to visit her mom as a slave and then they were able to kill the cow that they bought using the money that they got from the sale
So
of
it can
their
be
mother.
multiple situations. Either she was
Yes.
and sold to buy a cow. No, but then they were able to buy a cow, remember? They were able to buy a cow. They just couldn't buy a cow because that guy had already sold their
Yeah,
cow.
already sold their cow. But maybe but I don't know, maybe they eventually found a cow.
Yeah,
But if we just take the story literally,
yeah.
it's
Symbolically, I think you can think of so many ways. But
hmm
if we just take a look at the story, then the mom turned into a cow.
yep, as face
Just
value.
like the Thai Cinderella, the mom turned into a fish.
Into a fish.
Yeah.
Yes, into a fish. I think it's so interesting that these Cinderella stories are about orphan girls who go and find a man and then they run away from the man and then they lose a shoe. Because I totally forgot about the shoe. I remember all the clothes and I remember him chasing her, but I don't remember the shoe part until she told me. And I was like, oh my goodness, this sounds so much like the Western Cinderella.
Hmm.
And I just wonder why our cultures are so,
Intertwined.
yes. Who would have thought that the Western Cinderella would have a shoe also? And then she was helped by animals
But
too.
if you think about it, the Western, as in right here in the United States of America, we came from Europe, and that's part of the East a little bit. And so you can see that maybe someone tells stories and it would go from one area to another as they travel and trade with each other. So I can see that.
Yeah, I was thinking that it was just a story that just gets passed from culture
Hmm.
to culture and it every single culture just kind of adapted it to their own version.
And one complaint that I have is the father,
Yeah.
not being
Mhm.
able to protect his daughter. How even though, like, when the mother told him to go to the magical beings, and he's like, yeah, you can get better, but then he didn't fight back any more than that when the mother went and burned the thread and killing the mother cow, I didn't see the dad fight back at all. So to me, a lot of the husbands, they don't have that kind of
I don't
authority.
know why they are like this in the stories, because they make him look like he had no backbone. And his second wife basically made his daughter's life so hard. And then when the stepmother didn't allow his daughter to actually go to the celebration, the Hmong New Year, and you don't see the dad in the picture at all. Like you would think the dad would be like, no, let her come too. She's my actual blood daughter, because Gonteng is the stepmother's daughter, and Gona is his actual blood child. The whole point of him bringing the stepmother
Yeah.
in was to, quote unquote, give him children, but he doesn't even love the one child he has, or love her enough to be
Yeah.
standing up
And
for her.
back then, a lot of the times, if you look at our Hmong culture and how everything works, the social construct of things, a lot of the daughters, they are cared for by their mother. Daughters don't have relationships with their father. Only sons have relationship with their father because they can teach them to go hunting, to do all of the stuff that men do during that time. But during that time, the daughter needs to be trained by the mother. Even when her mom turned into a cow, one of the main thing that she needed to take care of her daughter was to provide for her, right? To make sure that she has something to wear for the New Year's. And it's funny that the dad is not providing these stuff when he was the one that's alive, or he's the one that hasn't been turned into a cow. And yet it's still the mother cow who still think of these stuff, trying to provide for her daughter. Even the stepmother, she's the one that does all the things for her daughter, and not the father, right? So we can see that during these times, yeah, if you don't have a mom, you do have a dad, but you don't have a mom, then you definitely can be considered an orphan because there's no one to take care of you.
Yeah, that goes back to the meaning of Gona's name, because her name is literally Gona, which means orphan girl. These stories,
Yes.
they're so subtle, but yet they're so like literally in your face. Like I'm an orphan, so my name is Orphan Girl. Mom says that Gonteng's mom is named Bonteng, and then the daughter's name is called Gonteng. And I was like, why? Why are they both the same? And mom was like, because Gonteng, that Bonteng means lazy. And I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, oh, that's the
Oh.
reason. So it's like it's so literal. It reminds me of the story we recently talked about, the Goiter girl, Zaimatsia. Like literally, that's her name.
Yes. Yes.
So I loved how the story is an example of the love a mother has for her child. Even though she was turned into a cow, she did everything she could, and she looked for ways of providing for her daughter, how you said, like what you were saying earlier. And I just thought that that was the sweetest thing. I think that's the reason why I love the Cinderella story, or the first part at least, because you can see the relationship between the mother and the daughter, and you see how much a mother's love overcomes the adversities that someone can face. And I love how you could see every time the mom was facing something, or every time Gona was facing something, the mom had a solution. And like with the thread and then the clothes, and it was like her mom was providing for her all the way to the very end.
Yeah.
Just as Gonteng's mom was providing for her till the very end. Come on, let me pack food for you. You go chase after them.
Yeah, right. And when you were talking in the story where the mom ate the flax and turned that into thread, kind of reminds me of something that mom said a long time ago, where she said, a mother's hand can turn nothing into something.
Oh, uh-huh.
To me, that's a very powerful statement, because even here in this modern time, you see a lot of people struggle. But then when you see a mother's love, they work so hard to provide for their children.
It transcends all other things. Yeah.
But then what happened to the husbands?
Right? Or maybe it
Yeah.
goes back to what you were saying. The husband was just like, all right, you have a mom, and the stepmother is your mom. She will take care of you. If she
Yeah.
sees that you don't need it, then you're not going to get it. And he's just like, okay, you rear the children. So maybe that's it. He's like, I'll
Yeah.
provide, but you rear the children, and I'll be hands off.
Yeah.
But sometimes I do know that when someone is enamored with someone, like if you're so in love with someone, you don't see their flaws. And maybe the father was so in love with the stepmother that he was blinded by love for her and he didn't see all the evil that she was doing to his child. And he was just blinded.
Yeah, with the mother's name literally mean lazy, I would see that he was totally enamored with her for him not to notice how lazy she is. Being that
Right?
time where they need someone to work hard in order to survive. And if I remember correctly, after they killed the mother cow, we just don't hear about the dad anymore. Either he died or he's just no longer part
I
of the
don't think he's
story.
dead yet because at the very end, he comes back or he has a role at the very end.
Okay.
His presence will be known. He might not be mentioned, but his presence will be known at the very end.
And then what are your thoughts of a damsel in distress needing a man to come save her?
Are you talking about for the story specifically or just in general?
For Go Na, she has to be saved by Shina because her life was pretty bad. And he was the one that
Yeah.
has to change the bowl of rice and change the meat for her. And then in the end, he was the one who switched her in Gonteng so that she can leave with him the next day.
I think that Gona really did need Shina to be the advocate for her because she had been under the abuse of her stepmother for so long that she didn't know how to fight for herself. And so it's like abuse victim who has been under the rule of thumb under somebody for so long. A lot of people are able to, but then a lot of people aren't as well. In the story, you see that Shina is the one who opens that door and allows her to escape with his help. And I don't think that was specifically bad because I feel like everybody needs help somewhere, sometime in our life. Her being the damsel in distress and him helping was perfectly okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering because these days, if we were to compare two stories these days, then it would be her saving herself instead of waiting for someone to come save her. So I just wanted your thoughts on that. Oh, but then you can also say that her mother also saved her because her mother provided clothes for her to give her the confidence to go to the New Year's.
Yes, it did. Her mother was the one that gave her the clothes because if she didn't, then she wouldn't have been able to even attend. She would have, but she wouldn't have looked as nice. And that's why her stepmother couldn't recognize her there because she's usually in plain clothes and I'm guessing not well manicured. And so they couldn't recognize her when she was all nice and clean and dressed up. That's what I never understood. I feel like if I was to see you out and about all dolled up, I wouldn't be like, that lady's very beautiful. She looks familiar. Oh well. Because Gonteng was at the wings waiting for her turn to ball toss with Shina for those past few days, and yet they didn't recognize her. I just thought that was the craziest thing. But this is a fairy tale, so crazier things have happened.
It can be because of the fairy tale. It can be understanding that this person, she would never be able to buy these kind of clothes or she will never be able to do this stuff. So why would she be here? One thing that I do wonder is when they were eating, why would you want to blow out the candles when you're eating?
I was thinking the same thing, and the only reason I could think of was that maybe candles were so expensive back then that they were trying to save candle wax.
That could be true. But then she had all those beeswax to throw
Yeah,
it away.
maybe that's why she's saving it for a beeswax mask. She didn't want to use up her beeswax on the candle. So that's the only thing I can think of because they would be eating in the dark and maybe they just expected everyone to kind of know, hey, this is your dish, eat whatever's in front of you. And I just thought that that was so weird that the stepmother was so
Willing to show her face.
in front of Shina. And then for her to like keep thinking that she's going to be able to trick Shina at the very end when she was like, that evil Shina, how dare he leave my daughter when she knew that Shina did not like Gonteng. Shina came after and go nah and he was going to marry and go nah. And the audacity for her to say, "How dare that evil Sheena," you know?
And
Yeah.
he is evil to her. She's not evil at
Yes. And
all.
then she doesn't see all the things that what she was doing that whole night of trying to feed bitter soup and barley to Gona instead of just making a full meal so everyone could eat well that night. She was like, "Nope, we're all gonna eat well except you, Gona, even though you're gonna get married tomorrow because you're not gonna get married. I'm gonna trick you to stay home." But
Yep.
she acts like Shina was going to like walk out the door, yes, and be like, "Huh, you don't look
Just
like
let it
Gona,
happen.
but I guess I'll marry you since you walked out the door with me." So I just thought that was so funny. Even as a kid, when we were listening to these stories, I just never understood how the stepmother thought that she could trick Shina into marrying her daughter. And then when they were already gone, insisting that her daughter go and chase after them. Like, what is she gonna do? I guess she can beg him to marry her, but I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait for part two to find out what happens. Please join us again for our next episode as we will be covering part two of the Hmong Cinderella or Go Na story. We hope you enjoyed today's first part and hope to see you again in the next part. Thank you so much for joining us.